The Ukrainian gas company Burisma is back in the news tonight, but this time it doesn't seem to have anything to do with Hunter Biden or the Ukraine scandal, at least not yet, because of course there are political undertones. After all, it's suspected that the Russians did the hacking. A Silicon Valley cybersecurity firm called Area 1 reported the hack. That group's co-founder was quoted in the Times. Quote, "The attacks were successful. The timing of the Russian campaign mirrors the GRU hacks we saw in 2016 against the DNC and John Podesta. Once again, they are stealing email credentials in what we can only assume is a repeat of Russian interference in the last election." Let's bring in our next guest, Robert Siciliano. He is a cybersecurity expert with etfmg.com. Robert, this hacking of Burisma, very worrisome. It's already being compared to the Russian hack of the DNC in 2016. How confident are you that it was Russia, and what do you think their goal was? Were they looking for embarrassing dirt again, only this time focused on the Bidens and not John Podesta and Hillary Clinton?
Yeah, so the hacking is very similar in nature to what was done during the previous election to Hillary Clinton's emails and others. Basically, they followed the exact same protocol by creating landing pages that look like Google to change up your or log into your Gmail account and so on. And security researchers looking at the forensics aspect of everything, all IP addresses certainly point back to Russia.
There's another similarity that's been reported, and that's the timing. That this hack of Burisma happened in November, just as impeachment was ramping up, just like in 2016 when the Russian hacking of the DNC began the day of the Access Hollywood release. That's a pretty damning coincidence, isn't it?
Yeah, it seems, when those in the current administration speak up and speak out and make requests broadly to the international hacking community, they respond in kind, or at least that's what it seems like. And as a result, it seems that those that were targeted have in fact been breached. And that information, whether it has or has not been released yet, I'm not sure if the general public has been made aware of that at this point.
One of the aspects of the 2016 hacking that was so problematic in terms of the election is that the emails that were released were both damaging and accurate, or at least most of it was. What do you think happens now with the info hacked from Burisma? And can hackers doctor it to make it look even worse? How should we react to any information that comes from these hacks?
Yeah, so when organizations like WikiLeaks and others, when they release that type of information, they actually give it a bit of credibility. It's assumed that they have vetted the data and that they consider it to be legitimate. All that being said, it is entirely possible to doctor anything digital, to put out a mock of or a rendition of what was actually hacked and change it all up is possible, and the public would be no more aware of whether or not it was real or fake.
So if, let's say the pattern repeats itself and some of this information winds up on WikiLeaks and winds up getting reported, how are you going to read those reports? Warily or not? How should we in the media handle those reports?
So the media has to take anything and everything that is hacked with a grain of salt. Usually what is done is they will research the information, they will contact anybody and anyone that was cited in those communications, and they will confirm the legitimacy or illegitimacy of those communications. So, of course, it is in the best interest of the bad guys, the hackers in this case, to grab whatever information can, in fact, be proven as being legitimate. Doctoring it will only make all of it look fraudulent.
So, Robert, what stops Russia from doing this, from hacking in general? Has the U.S. done anything to either prevent or try to tamp down Russian hacking?
There's nothing stopping Russia from doing this. There's nothing stopping any hacker from doing this other than various layers of security or various layers of protection that prevent them from getting in. But the problem here is that the majority of this kind of hacking is basically phishing emails. In essence, it's human hacking. And that means, targeted hacks, spear phishing, targeting, those within the organization, within that industry, so to speak, that have access to certain types of information. And when that person or entity is receiving, dozens or hundreds of emails, daily, weekly, monthly. It's just a matter of time until somebody clicks the link in the body of an email and either enters information, personal information, usernames and passwords, or they click a link that infects their machine, giving the bad guys access.
Sounds like you're saying we need to train or otherwise, warn people and educate people on how to prevent or how to avoid these kinds of situations.
Yes, this fundamentally is, security awareness training, and that's done in a controlled environment, generally either in a classroom where you have an instructor that explains what it all is. Also, phishing simulation training, where the users, the computer users, people like you and I, employees of an organization, get phished in a controlled environment to see who clicks the link in the body of the email, who coughs up the information, and then if in fact they do, the phishing simulation training responds with, okay, next time don't do this and why.
So let's push past the Burisma hack. What else could Russian hackers do, assuming they once again want to tip the balance to President Trump? And there's certainly no reason to think that they don't, at least when it comes to the election.
Yeah, right now that all revolves around disinformation campaigns. The Russians, Joseph Stalin, developed this back in the 50s. It's called desinformatia, basically a term coined, disinformation, for the disinformation, bureau within Russia. Back in the 50s, basically, it is the weaponization of information. And today, it's the weaponization of social media. And that is all done via viral memes, emotionally charged videos, and clickbait headlines that basically cause people to be divided. That is called divide and conquer. And divide and conquer revolves around, don't trust them, trust me. And in this case, either the Russians or the current administration. It's all meant so that, basically here in the U.S., we fight amongst each other. And you can see it happening as we speak. Basically anything that you post online, whether it's for or against the current administration, half of the population, doesn't like it. And that is all about disinformation and divide and conquer. And that's all being done via bots and memes and videos and so forth.
So that's the disinformation. What about the elections themselves? Are our elections secure? We know that the Russians hacked some state election systems, but we were told that no votes were changed. Do we know if they can do that? Can they change votes? And is that the only risk to the physical aspect of our elections from hackers?
Yeah, so the proverbial jury is still out on that. There have been breaches in various municipalities that have been, brought to light. The big concern right now is that the hardware that goes into the voting machines is being manufactured in countries like China and Russia, overseas essentially, and that if there are back doors installed in the voting machine technology, that one wonders whether or not those overseas, bad guys in this case, could get access to our information and, in effect, the voting machines and alter the outcomes. That has not been entirely proven at this point, but it is certainly a major concern.
Certainly there would be an interest in Russia doing that. Has the U.S. done anything to prevent hackers from doing that, physically disrupting our elections?
So, of course, there are, various systems in place that would prevent this from happening. From my understanding, most voting systems are essentially offline. Voting machines themselves are offline. The information is all done via paper, and it's inserted into computers that essentially are all calculated and tallied throughout the various municipalities and ultimately with each state. That being said, there is a lot of information that ultimately is connected to the internet, and it is possible that those systems could be breached.
Finally, Robert, I'm going to point the finger for the lack of preparation or defense against hacking of our elections on the president and the majority leader in the Senate. You're a cybersecurity expert. If a company's CEO was hit with a hack attack and responded at the same level that Trump and Mitch McConnell have, which I would argue is a pretty low level, what would happen to that CEO? And what are your thoughts just on Trump and McConnell's handling of the election and hacking threats?
Yeah, so anytime a CEO, for example, uses 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 as a password, he or she puts that entire organization in jeopardy, not just because it's a weak password, but because he is or she is demonstrating poor leadership skills. And we've seen that over and over again with the current administration on how they handle much of the election hacking, whether it's disinformation or or the security of the current elections and going into the future. So there is a lot of fear revolving around that. Much of it is justified. And as you know, U.S. companies are more engaged and more involved in the protection of the election systems, making sure to thwart any intrusions, we stand a pretty good chance of preventing it.
Robert Siciliano is a cybersecurity expert with etfmg.com. Robert, appreciate a few minutes. Thanks.
Thank you.
Up next on RFL, we shift gears. The Trump administration continuing to roll back environmental regulations. If you drink water or breathe air, this affects you, and not in a good way, not even close. We'll explain right after this.